Okay, everyone, let's crack on. This is noting that we're now in public workshops, that we have two apologies today, one from Councillor Branning and one from Councillor Grimstone. So our first workshop, you've got your timetable for the rest of the day in front of you, but welcome to Cinda and David, all yours.
Cool, so kia ora koutou. Today we'll be going through a quick workshop to provide an update on the draft climate action plan for Horowhenua and confirm the direction of travel with this work. I just want to note as well, there was a pre-reading that was circulated to everybody. There's a lot more content in that, which I'll be speaking to, but in terms of the slides, there will just be a brief commentary on those. Just to walk through the workshop agenda today, so I'll be going through a bit of the context for the background work that's been going on in relation to the Climate Action Plan. This includes previous direction from Council, as well as our regional partnerships with the Manawatu Wanganui Climate Action Joint Committee and the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee. I'll also give a quick update on the MFE call for data adaptation preparedness, as well as the Climate Data Initiative, which they're currently working on. Then we'll go into the purpose of our workshop, so I'll give an update on the Climate Action Plan, give a bit of a structure to what we've produced so far, seeking some direction on the objective and approach, and then seek some direction on what's needed to implement the Climate Action Plan. So just to speak to some of the previous direction from Council, so you'll recall that we had a Climate Change Action Plan presented back in 2021. This is what we've based our Climate Action Plan on, but we've also taken a different approach based on your feedback and also the proposed objective and approach. Back in 2021, the Council agreed to not adopt this Climate Action Plan, with the feedback given that it lacked a bit of community voice, that there was a lack of clear direction and there were actions that needed to be carried through. In March 2023, Council reaffirmed support for our regional partnership and the implementation of the Manawatu Wanganui Climate Action Plan. Council is working regionally with councils in the Manawatu Wanganui region, as well as with the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee in relation to their growth framework. Further to this, in October 2023, you'll recall that Council agreed to support the inclusion of a placeholder climate action budget in the long-term plan 2024-2044. This budget is within the draft long-term plan and remains subject to the current submission and hearings proceedings. Further to this work, Council also agreed that the preparation of an updated climate action plan remains a priority, which is why we're here today, and that the update be costed, tailored to the Horowhenua environment. Last week, Council carried the resolution to support the establishment of a carbon emissions portal to monitor and measure Council-controlled emissions, but Council also moved that the matter of funding for this unbudgeted item lay on the table until after LTP deliberations. In relation to what's on the slide though, I'd also just like to reaffirm that the focus of today's workshop is to seek direction and guidance on the Climate Action Plan, specifically the objective and approach. Drawing on some of the feedback received at our last climate workshop, which I recall was in October, I particularly want to thank Councillor Tukapua for the feedback received in our past presentations around risk and how we relate this into our Climate Action Plan. On the presentation slides, we relate to the presented on the slides, we've got the Organisational Risk Register for Climate Change Adaptation and Mitigation, which identified a few tangible and intangible consequences that we wanted to walk through. These have been considered and input into the Climate Action Plan. Reflecting on some of the direction from Council as well, I wanted to focus on our narrative and how we tell our story here in Horowhenua. Within the Climate Action Plan, we have a key focus both on what we can do to improve our environment, but also how we reflect our community and the awesome work that they're currently doing. On the slide, I've got a few examples which I wanted to speak to, and to try and get this message across about how we tell our stories and how we shape them to bring our community and others along the journey. With regards to the first bullet point, so environmental management through our district plan, our controls and how we process our consenting. I just wanted to speak to an example about how our district plan sometimes has that collation with our climate narrative story in relation to tara ika and the management of stormwater and rainwater gardens and rainwater tanks. So this was a great example about how the district plan can both enable and support environmental management through water controls and how we preserve our water usage. Moving on, in September last year, we were able to engage in a climate corridor with our local rangatahi through our youth empowerment program. This was through the successful receiving of a climate action grant we received from the Impact Challenge. The funding allowed us to have a corridor that was quite informal but also empowering for our young youth empowerment program, and we got to engage in some great corridor with them around how they see climate in our district and how we can better engage with them to bring them along the journey. Moving on, Council's social media lead visited Shannon's school to talk around their zero waste practices, which was shared with our community on our social media pages. Engaging with Shannon's school allowed us to have that better understanding about the work that we already do in our district and how we can bring that into our climate narrative. A couple of other examples up there about work that we're doing, particularly around our parks and property, also our sustainable water supply, and our understanding of risk. Moving on, as lots of you are already aware, we are involved in partnership with the Manawatu Wanganui Climate Action Joint Committee. And me being our welcome you to jump in if you see any disparities in what I'm saying, but or Jonathan, yeah. But I just wanted to reintroduce this action plan and clarify about how we work in partnership with our surrounding partners, as well as implementing our own climate action plan. The focus of the Manawatu Wanganui Climate Action Plan is around empowering the communities, working with nature, addressing known issues and supporting good decisions. The kaupapa of this plan is embedded through our own climate action plan and their objective and approach, but this climate action plan focuses on that regional approach and how we work with our tangata whenua members as well. Just like to welcome any questions while we're moving through, please recognise if I'm going a little bit too fast, but otherwise I'll just keep moving through. Secondly, in relation to our regional partners, I just wanted to introduce the Regional Emissions Reduction Plan. This was recently adopted by the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee. The Regional Emissions Reduction Plan presents key actions necessary to transitioning to a zero carbon region, meeting the needs and aspirations of the Wellington, Wairarapa, Horowhenua region. The focus of this plan is around transport and urban form, energy, the circular economy, and a productive land use and primary industries. I'd also just like to clarify here that this work connects closely to the Future Development Strategy led by the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee and how we plan for our growth while also supporting a sustainable environment, reaching those zero carbon goals. Moving on, back in September 2020, the Minister for the Environment requested information from over 400 organisations about how they are preparing for the impacts of climate change. Horowhenua District Council responded to that feedback, and then again in March 2024 we were asked again to provide feedback on the adaptation preparedness of our community. The request was for further high-level information about how our organisation is preparing for the impacts of climate change. for which this information provided will be used to track progress on the adaptation preparedness since the last call for data back in 2020, which provided for those baselines. Jumping to further MFE work, I just wanted to introduce the NIWA downscaled projections tool, which MFE are currently working on under their Climate Data Initiative team. This work is still in the early stages, and I'm still waiting on some further feedback about what it will be how it will deliver on its focus to reduce the inequalities of data access. But I just wanted to introduce this so that you're all aware of it in case it's used for future conversations. The core public data set will be made available on the 1st of July, with the front-end tool also being made available on that date. A key aspect of this tool which I wanted to clarify is that it's being used to enable that data access for our communities, but that in terms of being able to seek those specific data for your properties, it's based on a 5 kilometre radius of data. So all of those data pockets are on a 5 kilometre radius. And lastly, in relation to our context prior to the draft Climate Action Plan presentation, I just wanted to discuss a little bit about the 2019 emissions inventory which was completed. This inventory is our latest emissions inventory with comparable data for our Horowhenua district. The method used for this was using the Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Emissions, and the method includes emissions from stationary energy, transportation, waste, industry, agriculture, and forestry. What we found from this inventory is that Horowhenua district emitted about 800,000 CO2 and contributed to 10% of the Manawatu Whanganui region. A key aspect to understand around this is that the reason for us presenting high and low in some of these aspects is particularly around our agriculture community. What was apparent when we did our comparative study with the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee is that the likes of Wellington emitted much higher in their transport aspects as opposed to us who emitted higher in our agricultural sectors. I just also like to note here that within Horowhenua we've made a considerable effort to increase our planting and also connect to local forests, which improves our carbon emissions through carbon sequestration. I'd just like to pause there quickly and just welcome any questions before I move on. Alright, so down to the tricky bit. So I'd like to welcome now some feedback and direction on our draft climate action plan. This has been crafted based on both the 2021 version that was presented to Council, but also crafted from more of a community and strategic lens about how we deliver climate action in our community. It's also got feedback from councillors at previous meetings, as well as some examples from our regional partnerships and how we can draw those into our own climate action plan. With regards to our structure, so our action plan has a focus on I am the environment is me. Our plan is structured in terms of our objectives, our approach, our local environment, how our emissions feed into our action plan, the many webs and flows in which the roles and requirements of local government are included, and then it goes into a specific climate action table which breaks down our achievable outcomes categorised through time, delivery, and cost. With regards to our objective, in this action plan, Horowhenua District Council looked to connect relevant opportunities for mitigation and adaptation that will support sustainability objectives focused on climate change. It focuses on creating a plan in which Council identify areas of opportunity, shift in practice or change in routine to improve outcomes for the environment we love. The plan aims to improve Council practice specific to climate change so that progress from a local perspective can provide insight for future policy. In terms of our objective, it's structured in terms of the government's direction of climate change and the aspects in which Horowhenua District Council aim to achieve these. These are broken down into 5 different aspects, so about protecting our outstanding environment, sustaining our vibrant horticulture, agriculture and viticulture practice in line with enhancing environmental outcomes, improving the mana of Horowhenua by weaving my tauranga Māori across our climate actions, providing for population growth in line with achieving climate outcomes, and then ensuring access to data, information and stories of Horowhenua environmental change while reducing inequalities of climate impacts. Moving on to our approach. To achieve the objective of this action plan, we need to focus on a just transition to a sustainable district economy that improves rather than exacerbates inequalities. While the actions explored in this plan represent a powerful tool for Horowhenua to reduce the damage caused by environmental change, we recognise that no one approach can completely eliminate hazards or remove all risks. Climate mitigation and adaptation present a compelling pathway for Horowhenua to prepare for environmental change that will place great pressure on current infrastructure. The proposed approach for our climate action plan includes a whole bunch of values in which I was looking to test with you all today. These include working together, consideration of climate in everything we do, so that's around our decision making, education opportunities on what climate action means for Horowhenua, protecting our hazardous communities, flooding in terms of our data access and knowledge, acting now for future mokopuna so that voices not heard will often feel the most impact, being transparent in our decision making and approach, being equitable in resourcing of climate action, ensuring that there's no wasteful spending, and then remaining open to new information, science, ideas and ways of doing things. Connecting this to our local environment, the plan is a guide for Horowhenua to work together to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change across our district. While our aim is to improve policy decisions to enable durable solutions for environmental change, the future may seem uncertain, but the impact will be highly impactful for those still to come. In terms of how the plan is drafted, we've taken a slight pivot in terms of the previous one, which was quite strong in its language, and taken more of an environmental collective approach, drawing on that if the natural world is healthy, so too are our people. Embracing both a Māori and Western worldview, the plan will look to mitigate the complex issues of our community face through the lens of protecting the environment. For the really fun part, so I'd just like to connect kind of the web of information in which we can draw from in creating a climate action plan, specifically to the roles and requirements of local government. I'm sure it's not new to anyone. We've got lots of national context and legislation of which we can draw from in relation to the climate action, specifically Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Resource Management Act, the Climate Change Response, Zero Carbon Amendment Act, and then also the Local Government Act. Further to these in our policy space, we have all of the national policy statements in which we draw from in protecting and enhancing our natural environment. Specific within the Climate Action Plan, it's tailored around the direction provided in the Urban Development MPS, the Highly Productive Land MPS, the Indigenous Biodiversity MPS, Renewable Electricity Generation MPS, and then also our Freshwater Management MPS. I'd also just like to introduce the proposed MPS for natural hazard decision making. This was released end of last year, and we're still waiting on direction as opposed to the feedback that was provided from that. What this picture tells is that there's lots of national policy statements that are coming through that can be weaved into our decision making lens, but the direction is quite clear in these, and that relates directly to the RMA. Further, in terms of our local council and local context and council plans, I'd also just like to introduce and connect in some of our strategies in which we already use and implement across our council decision making. These being the waste minimisation management plan, the growth strategy, the infrastructure management plans and asset plans, our long-term plan and the district plan. And then also further connecting in our regional partnerships. Moving on to our strategy for a changing environment, I just wanted to hone in on the focus of the climate action plan being sustainability, mitigation and adaptation. This being that all of the actions in which are proposed in the action plan are aligned and specific to one of these certain focuses and how we deliver them for our community. So mitigation being how we reduce our impact. Mitigation means to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases we put into our atmosphere. This being that we know a certain amount of change is already locked in due to past emissions, but that Horowhenua can limit future impacts of climate change by reducing future emissions. To understand and identify key shifts, it is important to understand the grounding or direction, so to empower co-benefits of our actions such as through mitigation. We have adaptation, responding to a changing climate. This being adaptation means to modify the way we do things to reduce the impact of environmental change on us and ecosystems. Beyond doing everything we can in Horowhenua, to slow the pace of environmental change, we must also adapt to climate consequences. Adaptation being the variety of scale and impact, they require major shifts to protect ourselves and our community. This being the impact which is often unpredictable will require a large-scale effort. And then lastly, a focus on being sustainable, responding with a focus on our future. Sustainability in the context of climate change focuses on achieving positive outcomes today while sustaining the potential of natural and physical resources to meet the reasonably foreseeable needs of future generations. The environment being a core element of climate change must be taken into consideration across all decision making and has been moved through the climate action plan as drafted. Moving forward, some of the feedback received at past presentations was around the delivery of a climate action plan and how we action it and make achievable outcomes for our community. After having drafted a form of the climate action plan, it was evident that 8 key aspects were identified around how we can achieve our climate action goals and promote these for our community. These are just draft at the moment, and I welcome any direction and such. You'll note in your pre-reading that there's a table at the back of that. This is a lot more detailed and provides some of that detail on which we'll be discussing, but I just wanted to introduce some of the actions in which we'll be seeking feedback on. So these are broken down into navigating behaviour change within Horowhenua, enabling regenerative tourism through destination management, ensuring we have process for monitoring and reporting, making business improvements that support our outstanding environment, promoting climate and biodiversity leadership, enabling a transport strategy that promotes a sustainable network, ensuring infrastructure is built resilient to a changing climate, and supporting the development of thriving, connected, climate-resilient communities. So this slide I'll recognise is very tight and small on the presentation, but again I'll just welcome you to look at your pre-reading that was circulated. I just wanted to welcome any questions in terms of the structure of the action plans as present, but also talk through some of the direction and reasoning for how these are structured at the moment.
Is there sorry, I might have missed the point. The reason why you've just pulled these ones out of the action plan, which has obviously 2.1, 2.2.
Just to introduce and kind of discuss some of the aspects in terms of all the different actions. So it's not an exhaustive list, and I was just wanting to put it up as an example about how some of these cross over. So yeah, the presentation will be different, but it's not the exhaustive list.
Okay, so I've just got reservations for 5 of the 2-page table. That's 1.2, 3.1, 4.1, 5.8, and 7.2. I don't want to be. Everyone needs to have a chance to talk, so I don't. Maybe you just want me to pick a couple of those and say why, or should I just give you some detail later? I'm not sure how to do this.
I like the plan. The table of actions is the thing that we're going to need to spend a whole lot of time on. I wonder if that should almost be a subsequent workshop, and potentially with it being fully populated and with us providing maybe pre-commentary in an additional column. I wonder if we should be focusing on the format of it, and if we kind of, as much as I want to get moving and say, heck yeah, let's do it, we need to talk about this more. Unfortunately, I'm happy to say let's do it today, but I don't think we're going to get that around the table.
Let's test it.
I'd love a column in this. We've got estimated cost, but estimated impact. Obviously, we need our measuring tool to be able to estimate impact. But given that we're just ranking things low, medium, high / no impact, a lot of these I rank as no impact, and therefore say that I don't want to prioritise them. And I do wonder if we should be prioritising this table ultimately, or if then we're getting far too into the nitty-gritty details and that's an operational decision, despite this being a political matter about climate.
So that's helpful in the sense that, as Jacinda explained, the idea wasn't to give you the whole action list. There's some that are still just being worked through, but and before we went to the level of detail that some of them need to be able to populate that table, did want to check in that is a table, and so the feedback you've given around that as a framework, some extra columns and things like that is what we're looking for here. And I think hearing and agreeing with your point that happy to obviously take some feedback on things that you're getting an early signal on, but we saw ourselves coming back to you with the populated version, and obviously that having more time before it lands as an action plan. So probably if maybe we could just close out any more comments around the sort of the framework, and then if there's the detailed numbers that you want to provide commentary on today, we can take that.
I just wanted to clarify a little bit more on that. We're seeing this table of actions as a auxiliary document to our broad policy statement action plan, or what's the ultimate format of it? Because do people generally like the happy fluffy words above it? I do. They communicate what I'd like to see in the climate action plan. The table of actions is the part I'm more excited about, the actually doing stuff. But what's the vibe?
So in terms of how I envisioned it being presented and encapsulated within the document, so the action plan will introduce the narrative and the story, the objective and approach, and then at the end of the action plan we'll have the tables in which we'll take ownership and partnership of for our community. So these will be, as I say, in terms of how they're drafted, there's lots of work to do in terms of both officer, community and council engagement on those and how we draft them. But in terms of the structure is what we were looking to get feedback on today.
You just go back one slide. I'm sorry. I just because this is where I'd like to start, just have a bit of discussion, because and so my questions are going to be my first question is going to be to the table, right? So number one, navigating behaviour change within Horowhenua. My question to the table is, tell me why you think it is council's role or job or right to try and influence behaviour change, and so because this was one of the themes that I took issue with in the first time that this climate change action plan came to our table. Because imagine if we said to people, you should eat less because you will generate less wastewater and going through our plants. Like, we are not, in my opinion, we are not in the game of telling people how they should live, and there is a balance. I accept there's a balance where we can create settings that inevitably allow people to make choices that then do change behaviour. But this is my initial reaction to this was I don't like that particular one. Thankfully, I don't see it necessarily colouring the actions themselves that are on the table, but I was keen just to have the discussion as a table, like, what is council's role or job in relation to behaviour change? And I'm really keen to hear people's views on it.
I don't want to talk too much because I think it'd be great to get a lot around the table. I kind of went through that list as well, and I put essential on some of these, and I put yes on some of these, and number one was one I put sure question mark on. The second one I put met. So that was kind of my thought on impact / reward for these. I did want to note that did you get an email from your power company telling you to use less power because we're in crisis because the national grid's screwed? It's kind of similar to say, stop polluting because the planet's a bit screwed.
Oh, where do I start, Sam? We just spent an hour with economic people trying to tell them how we can direct the economic development of this district as well. Change behaviours and manipulate the way our community looks in terms of the economy in the future. I think you're reading way too much into number one. I think, there's a point where us as a council and us as leaders in this area have to say, we think this is a real thing and we're taking some action. We're taking some steps to show the community on how we can do better in this space.
Yeah, Councillor Proctor, you said we think this is a real thing, and that's about where it sits. There are, I hesitate to say, but I'm thinking there's probably a silent majority out there that doesn't think this is a real thing, and I hope the ratepayers got deep pockets, because this is just the beginning of what I would call just plainly wasteful spending.
I might just give some commentary around two of the actions that I'm not comfortable with, and the first one, for example, 1.2, around the education piece. It signals that it would be a low spend, but I wonder whether that money could come from somewhere else. Like, are there not other initiatives, or that we would just partner with, so that we actually don't have to spend money. The other thing too about it is I don't want to see our social media platform saturated with this stuff. I think we have more important things, like if I've been to an accelerator program in Wellington recently, which talked about what the issues are facing New Zealand today and ranking them, and there were things like the cost of living, housing, the price of housing, healthcare, crime, law, violence, antisocial behaviour, the economy, poverty, petrol prices, education, issues facing Māori, like they just went on, and then climate change features, but it's not at the top. And I just, in balance, want to see that this is not kind of our number one. So with some, careful management, 1.2, and outside funding, external party funding, I wouldn't mind. But one of the bigger ones for me, which is 7.2, is transitioning to low carbon infrastructure, which is a very high cost thing to do and done over a long period of time. And by committing to that now, it obviously commits future councils and other decision makers to either stay on that train, which in and of itself is just very expensive and uncertain, and I am nervous about that, not having more information. And I think each project capital spend that we do, you have to know climate change will be a consideration, but it has to be in balance with all the other things that we consider. So as a standalone item, I don't like it there. And that's just, But the other things I can either flag later, but that's just so everyone hears my thoughts.
We've got a whole lot of policies with a whole lot of broad statements like that, and we don't follow any of them. That's my thoughts on that one. I'm struggling to see how we're going to get very far on this table, and we're not even looking at the final table. I think my initial suggestion of let's get the final table, let's all go through it independently and put our comments in a column, and let's see where this table aligns on what we think are good things, and let's put those in, is possibly the only way to move forward. Yeah, there's still going to be some people around the table who go, this is stupid, let's not do it at all. But let's get something that we can agree on for the majority that moves us forward.
So happy to take that as an approach. Obviously, where we're at is using this as a check-in. Jacinta and others will be spending time on this to present you an action plan as per the organisation KPI, and we wanted to use today as an opportunity, I guess, check that we were spending time on the right aspects that you wanted to see come through when you considered a climate action plan. We've heard today some commentary on some aspects at that sort of higher level of actions that suggest that certainly aren't for those of you who are supportive of, I guess, seeing a table of actions, they sit sort of lower in the list of priorities. Probably haven't heard enough to convince us that we shouldn't continue to explore those 8 headings, and that the discussion around the table then can decide whether those are in or out. But if I've misread the room, or if there is a consensus that a couple of those numbers up there are ones that you don't want Jacinta and the team to be spending more time on working up as actions to bring through for that next discussion, then it would be helpful to get that steer now. So would it be appropriate to maybe just go through one by one, and it would only be if there was an absolute consensus. We're just looking for a steer, but if there was a consensus around the table that don't bother exploring that any further, then that means we wouldn't spend time on doing that. But if there is not a consensus, then it's one we continue to advance up. So really want comfort of that as a process today, just to ensure we are spending time in the right spaces.
Yeah, I just worry, David, with already the signals that we're at both ends of the spectrum in terms of this. I don't think you're going to get any consensus in terms of that. And I probably would prefer Rogan's approach, that we individually do that, because I think then people will be a lot more willing to probably provide their commentary around it, because I think there's some that probably either not here or won't provide the commentary. I'm sort of more leaning towards what Rogan's suggesting.
Look, with respect, I have a different view on this. We've had a chance to look at those proposed actions in our pre-reading, and I just wonder, and I don't particularly like the offline thing where we sort of do it individually. That we need an open process here in terms of the public as to where we stand and why. And I think there's the ability to move fairly expeditiously through each of these, the opportunity to speak in favour or against each of them, and then just a show of hands as to whether we feel further work should be done on each of them. So it's an open process, it's a chance for a quick say. A couple of people only so far have spoken to number one. I have a view on it. And then just a quick show of hands as to whether we want to progress each of them in turn. If majority says one is out, then it's out.
Just on the 8 headings?
Just on those 8 headings, yeah.
Cool. Great.
That's my personal view.
Yeah, I suppose I was just responding to David's thing around reaching consensus. I don't think we're going to be able to do that type of thing. So they're all going to be in anyway.
So can I just ask a clarifying question before we go through that process? Because one of the things that is relevant to my decision making is, how does this action plan interact with other strategies, plans, policies, that kind of thing? Because I'll take you through an example. Sorry, this is going to get into the weeds. But for example, we have action 5.7, promote the use of sustainable recyclables material while reducing waste generation at all council workspaces and facilities. Does that mean, for example, when we go and procure office furniture, carpet, whatever, that we might have a procurement policy here that says go local, get the best possible price, but yet we've got an action plan here that says use recyclable materials, do right by climate change and the environment. Conflict, right? So what trumps what? And so, like, understanding how this document will fit and influence how we do our business across all those other different pieces, and that's just one example, right? That's the little bit of uneasiness that I have, because we've seen the practical side of that, where a government department will go and buy woolen carpet at twice the price, because it makes sense from a climate perspective, but it doesn't make sense from a financial perspective and a value for money perspective. Equally, we've seen the other side of that, where a government department buys synthetic carpet and it's cheaper, but it's come from overseas, and so there's criticism. So, and I'm sorry that that's such a micro example, but I think it's a good one, because it just shows you can have this document, no matter what it says, having real clarity around hierarchy, what trumps what does this action mean in terms of that broader context. It's actually a really important consideration. So I don't know how we navigate that, and others might have an idea on that.
I mean, to me, this document isn't ever going to trump the procurement process the way it's written. This says promote the use of sustainable recyclable materials. This is going to be somebody sends one email and says, can we make sure we use recyclable materials? I'd much prefer a line that says, let's add a weighting to all our procurement plans that's worth 1%. That
that we have a climate consideration. That would be more factual, and it would be a 1% rating versus, cost would rate at 50%. So we're always going to win on cost and 10% for local when it's a 1% climate consideration in procurement. But this document doesn't say that we're going to put anything in our procurement plans. It's fluffy soft words, isn't it?
So, at the beginning, I flagged 4.1, exactly what Sam said in relation to this, and you'll see the responsible team, parks, property, and procurement. And it talks about council demonstrating leadership and committing to emission reduction and sustainability. So it is, or it can do, what Sam just described in 4.1. And that was one of my concerns, though I didn't give that example.
Oh, I think you're all way down in the weeds too much, trying to predict what may happen or may not happen. I think we could trust our staff to make good decisions based on the documents that they have in front of them all. So.
What I wonder if we could achieve today is the headline statement for each of those, because when we get into those particular actions, you're quite right, there are flags, there are conflicts, there is work to be done in terms of a hierarchy approach or whatever. But where my head is at is that we address each of the headline statements, so that number one, simply whether or not we agree that we have a role to play navigating behaviour change within Horowhenua. What that looks like in the individual actions that fall out of that could be subject for a later discussion. I wonder if that would be a way through.
Look, so if people are happy with it, my suggestion is that we simply take the highlighted statements each time, opportunity to speak in favour or against, and then a show of hands. Consensus is out, we know that. So in that case, we have to default to majority rules. So for number one, to navigate behaviour change within Horowhenua, do we believe that's an appropriate action for us as a council? So my view, I haven't spoken yet to that, a couple of people have, is I think there is a role for us in that, and that is because we as a council have access to a plethora of information around the climate and movement within the climate. We also have our networks, both to the north and the south, through our regional connection, and also through the Wellington framework. So we are a huge gatherer of information, and it seems to me that on that basis, we do need to be seen to have a role in behaviour change and sharing that information. So that's my view. Are there any other views?
Too, David, mainly because of the resilience aspects of that. I do believe that we need to be a bit more proactive in terms of determining or navigating those resilience things, and if that means, providing infrastructure support to different things or whatever it is, I do believe we've got a role to play in that.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to it?
I support 1.1 and 1.3, reservations about 1.2 without more information.
Council has no business getting involved in engineering people's behaviour, and it's just as simple as that.
I think I've shared my views on this particular one. Like, there was a reason I didn't vote for the Labour government that wanted to tell me how long my shower should be and what kind of shower head I should use and what kind of light bulbs I would have. So I think that tells you everything about that one.
Factual correction, it was the Greens, but moving on. Could we maybe have just got to get rid of that. So anyone else wishes to speak to number one? Paul?
And I don't think that the council has a position to play here either.
Can I just say, with 1.3, we're already doing that, have for a long time. It is a good thing. So may that continue regardless of where this goes.
If there's no one else wishes to speak, could we just get a show of hands, those who support number one? This is the headline statement. Those who are opposed to it? Is someone counting? I didn't count. Number two, does anyone want to speak to that before we vote?
I would like to hear more about it, actually. Can you explain that a bit further?
So action 2 kind of speaks to how it's kind of around that storytelling and how we navigate our story around climate change. So it's understanding that in terms of how we promote us as Horowhenua to our potential tourism market, that we're also providing that thriving economy and kind of our connection to our awas and our oceans, that we promote our sustainable options for our communities. Within the actions, it's also got discussion about our potential business and community partnerships. So it also speaks to demonstrating carbon neutral practice and promoting some of that awesome innovative behaviours that we already have in Horowhenua.
Thanks. Oh, yeah, no, sorry, I'll jump in straight away. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if we took this outside of a climate change debate or an issue, and you said you were going to improve storytelling about how wonderful our organisation is and remove those attitudes about Levin being undesirable and things like that, well, then that's something that's no-brainer, we should do it.
Anyone else wish to speak before we do the show of hands? No, appears to be no one. Oh, sorry, who have we got? Oh, sorry, Mike.
Unfortunately for me, it's tied with the same brush. It's still cost, it's still money we don't need to spend. It's tied up with the whole thing, and that's a no.
I'll do 2 cents on this. As much as I don't think council should be pissing money away on destination management, I think if we're going to do it, it would be great to promote the ecotourism that, rich yuppies love to come spend money on. We've all been to a little eco retreat and went, oh, composting toilets, isn't this progressive and nice? Yeah. Why not? Sure, I'm on board.
Any other thoughts? Pity.
It's by how much? Like, are we effectively promoting businesses that do this practice versus others that don't? And then, like, is that, I guess in simple terms, are we propping up businesses that do this rather than those that don't?
At this stage, all we're doing is asking for more work to be done in this space, aren't we? We're not actually deciding anything. We're not committing any funding. We're not doing anything. We're just asking for further information and more data.
Could I then request for that one, and there's some others, like what I need is a problem statement or the opportunity statement. Like why is that more important than something else? Like, so why is that? Because that probably was the one that kind of was like, well, we could do some of that through our destination management strategy stuff already. Why does it need to be in here? So that was just, it wasn't a criticism. It was just like, where has this come from? Why is this important? Like, the where's the why? And so that one was probably, that'd be useful for some more information. to go, does it need to be here, or could this be driven in a different context? So why isn't it part of the destination management strategy? But that's the
Just aware of time, so are we okay to vote now on that one? On number 2? In favour, could you raise your hands, please? Someone counting it.
That was the same.
Yeah, and against? 1, 2, yeah, so it's carried. So for number 3, and does someone urgently wish to speak on? Otherwise we'll vote. So any urgent discussion on number 3? Appears to be none. So those in favour of the monitoring and reporting, I think we've had this discussion anyway, haven't we? Yeah. Those against? 2 against, so that's carried. Number 4, the business improvements that support our outstanding environment. Anyone wish to speak before we do the show of hands? Okay, I'm going to just call for it then. For number 4, those in favour, please raise your hands. 2, 3. And those against? 1, 2, 3. 3 against, so it's carried also. Number 5, promoting climate and biodiversity leadership. Anyone wish to speak to that before we do the show of hands? Appears not to be. Number 5, those in favour, please raise your hands. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, well, I already flagged the one before, which is 4.1, which is why I voted the other way. This one is 5.8 for me.
And that's noted pretty, but at this stage it's just that high level headline. Yeah. So number 5, did we vote on that? I forgot. We did not. So those in favour of number 5? Thank you. Those against? So that's carried. So number 6, the transport strategy. Anyone wish to speak to that? Appears not. Could we then vote? Those in favour, please raise your hands. Yeah, I think that's overwhelmingly carried. Number 7, infrastructure. Build resilient to a climate change. Anyone wish to speak to that? Anyone wish to speak? So Pity wishes to speak. Can we hear Pity, please?
A strong no to 7.2.
How you feel about 7 as a concept, just the headline?
I think it's important that we have resilient infrastructure as a bottom line to this organisation.
Please, if in favour, raise your hands, please. That's carried. And number 8, support the development of a thriving, connected, climate resilient communities. Anyone wish to speak to that before we raise the hands? Appears not. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Against? That's carried too. Okay, thanks, David.
No, thank you. And whilst the outcome ended up getting back to where we were a few moments ago, it was helpful, I think, to ensure that we didn't go and invest time if there wasn't a desire at the table. So do appreciate your indulging us in that way.
I think there was I've spun in there. There was a bit of a subconscious prioritisation exercise in there based on the number of yeses for some of the categories as well, which we can take away.
Oh no, we did. We were busy scribbling down the scores, so we have got that, and certainly took away on board where I guess without going in through all the detail, there were signals given that there were some aspects of a section where people have a level of discomfort, or we might need to do some additional work.
Can I just say, I think the reason you're commented about how on some there were more yeses than others, and it's because my impression is because some of those headlines are not, they're not about, like, the why is clearer. Like, it's, the why isn't just about climate change, it's just because it makes sense. Like, the monitoring reporting will allow us to make better business decisions and, like, financial decisions, planning decisions, strategic decisions, all that kind of stuff. And so that kind of flowed through some of those. And so it's not surprising that, like, this action plan isn't going to necessarily be shouldn't be the only reason that we're doing those things, because they're smart business decisions. And yeah, you know that.
Cool. All right, thank you, everyone. That was actually really helpful to understand kind of the direction of travel as well of this document, which is the purpose of today's workshop. So thank you for going through that. And in terms of the feedback on the individual actions, we will be circulating this for individual feedback as well. So I'll welcome any of that when the full draft is complete. I'm just going to move forward, conscious of time, to our last slide, which is around what is needed from Council to proceed with the Climate Action Plan. I'll just ask here, in terms of what I presented so far, and it has come through in some of the commentary received, I just want to ask, is there any voices which are clearly missing and should be better weaved throughout this plan?
Yeah, there's been a mention in some of that table around business, and I'm not sure they've had a good go at providing feedback in this space particularly, so it'd be good to hear that voice.
Oh, sorry. Just in relation to whose voice is missing, and it would be nice to go through all those sticky notes out on the boards out there, especially the ones from the schools, to see how prevalent this issue is amongst the rangatahi and kids of our community as well.
Cool. And then just in terms of our last action up there, so is there any further feedback on items that you'd like to see included in this action plan? Noted a couple that have already come up, but I just want to welcome any other feedback before we close up on our workshop today.
The potential for GSS, the local government financing authorities, green loans for funding this. Given that this is going to end up with a potential 100k budget, which is nothing, can we still loan fund it at a cheaper rate? When you look at the last report, there's also a list of all the actions from every other council that were potentially eligible for GSS loan funding. And there's some really neat things in there that might be worth stealing for our table. I do note that you can use that funding for shared pathways and water sustainability, including water metering. So, if we could knock a point off our funding lines for that, that'd be nice.
I disagree with something you said there, Councillor Boyle. $100,000 isn't actually nothing, and it's coming out of the ratepayer's pocket. And just to go back to number 2, whose voice is missing and should be weaved through this plan, why don't you go and ask the silent majority? Have you ever heard the idea that silence is also feedback?
Rogan, just picking up on your point then, where you said that there's some, I'm not across what you talked about, but the ideas from other councils. Like, is there some that you would proactively put into the mix in terms of talking to these guys around what you thought was some, because like what you said kind of resonated with me in terms of the like again, we're doing water metering for a broader purpose. We're doing leak detection for a broader purpose. It's not just one driver. And so, like, if there's some of those ideas that could be brought forward and potentially, because sounds like there might be actions that are more significant or more impactful, more meaningful, that should be in the mix. And so that's all I was just wanting to try and elicit?
I haven't exhaustively gone through that list yet. There's some neat actions like, Horowhenua City Council, $14 million loan for installation of water meters at a better rate than we'll be getting. So we could be using it for other things. I do think that this table of action plans should have items that are never going to fall in that 100k budget, and we go, that'd be a nice to have thing that maybe someday some council's going to want to allocate funding to. I'm not quite sure how we capture those, and if this is an action we'd like to do, but we want it to be externally funded, because there's a whole lot of funding out there.
Just a few last comments about, I guess, what we've all shared so far. On the spectrum, okay, that falls in against some kind of in the middle, but not on the fence, and I have some strong views about certain aspects. Okay, I've never liked the sensationalization of topics and how it's, and they blow it up to be massive, and then you throw a lot of money at it and hope the problem goes away, because that's never really effective. I'm looking for things that make sense, and at the same time, like, as a foundation of mine, the environment is important. Don't pollute it. Like, I've never heard until recently a sound interview with someone who is pro the climate change thing, Dr. Rod Carr, and I'm going to share it with everyone via email. It's just a link to a 12-minute YouTube video, because he doesn't sensationalise it, and he talks about, there's these global targets, but actually let's just focus on New Zealand, and let's just do these meaningful things for these range of reasons, and it makes sense. Like, so for the first time I thought, finally someone's talking, I guess, about it in a way that I receive. So bearing in mind the things I've said I don't like, well, as a whole, it's okay.
I've talked too much, but I'm going to keep going. I'd love to see a plan that actually had a target, but I don't think it would pass around this table, so I'm not pushing for that. A whole bunch of other councils have made targets. I don't think we need to, and I don't think we'll actually hit it. I'd love to see the composting trial that was discussed at LTP Deliberations as one of our actions in here.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, for that valuable feedback. We'll leave it there, and we've got lots of work to do in terms of offices. So thank you for your time and your engagement on this today, and I look forward to talking with you again on this. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacinda. Cool.
Do you want a quick break, Mayor Bernie, or straight into Shannon?
No, let's get straight into it, eh? We're running a bit behind, so let's move on.
you'll be able to, just take with you. So the first question is, what would be the impact on future generations if we don't address environmental issues today, especially around our local rivers, our local streams and our local beaches? Secondly, what legacy would you like to leave behind as elected members of this community? How would you like to be remembered? That's just a few questions that came out of that last presentation for me, and I thought since I got the opportunity, I'll throw it on the table. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora. Thanks, Nev. Really not seeking particular guidance today, but wanting to shine a little bit of a spotlight on some of the mahi that's being progressed around the Shannon wastewater. So this is not unique to Shannon, and it's not unique to Ngāti Whakatere, who are hapu at place that we've been progressing some work alongside on this particular project. Whether it's the pot, whether it's Matakarapara Island or the Tokomaru wastewater or back to Shannon, there's a history dating back, in this particular case, almost a decade, where a lot of energy and effort's been put into the front end of a consenting process or the lead up to a consent. A lot of energy both on the side of hapu and iwi and also council in order to reach agreement and get a consent process across the line. But we often find as the next project comes along and the energy's refocused, that some of those commitments, due to, and sometimes, a lot of the time it's actually getting an alignment on what the objectives being sought is, and actually, spending that time together to advance and put the detail around it so we can actually then deliver. So this particular project, the funding historically has been sitting within the wider wastewater activity, and we've got a similar situation with the likes of Matakarapara Island. So we've intentionally, through the latest round of capital reprioritisation, ring-fenced and highlighted where we've got funding set aside in this example over the next 5 years for commitment of historic commitments around the Shannon wastewater, versus it being kind of lumped inside the treatment plant in general and the renewals of a valve and a pipe and a irrigation system. So we really have tried to highlight when we get that work to a point we can actually say this is what we think we intend to do, that it's actually delegated some budget within the long-term plan. So really focusing on that today. It's important to acknowledge that the work that we're doing on this particular project alongside Ngāti Whakatere, that they actually already have some of their own work in progress at the likes of Te Maire Lagoon. We've been invited out there in a couple of weeks' time to assist with a planting day. There's some work that the connections that Nev's developed through Horizons, they've acknowledged they've probably got some work to do in terms of their commitments made, that if council does one side of a stream, then perhaps Horizons would do another. And we are seeking through subsequent financial years, ultimately, a commitment of a program of work, but that will come back through regular council procurement and decision-making processes. So the early phases that we're putting up for completion this financial year are really very much must-dos around something that should have already been done with the wastewater discharges into the river and extreme rainfall events, and I'll show a little bit more detail around that shortly, and also where we've actually got wider community benefit around actually creating a recreation type space alongside what is almost the catalyst to that stream development project. So expect you've had a bit of a read. Won't jump into too much detail around the history, but I think it's well acknowledged that right across the district there was a period where untreated wastewater was disposed of into streams that got to a point of treated wastewater, and certainly over the last decade we've been transitioning that out of waterways and onto land treatment disposal. I think there's a fairly good awareness across the system out at Shannon. So unless there's any particular slides around clarification, any particular questions around clarification of how the system operates at Shannon, we're quite keen to jump into the sort of a bit more of the detail around the views of iwi and hapu, and then how we plan to partner on a strategy to move forward.
tag teaming today. And can I ask questions that you're probably about to answer? Or
Yeah, certainly.
I was real stoked with this. I quite liked the whole presentation of this from the pre-reading. In terms of those 2018 recommendations, we say in mid-2023 we adopted some of them. Which one did we adopt and which didn't we? And does the 500k, how much of the 500k covers what over the next 5 years?
I think we ended up adopting recommendation number 3, and that was riparian planting. Also recommendation number 6, I think that was the fencing. The fencing around the Valvoline external HILP, the high rate land passage. And was that 3? And number 10, yeah. So we've got a photo through the slide that shows number 10.
So at a officer and CE level, obviously there's been a letter that has gone and when our incoming CE to remind council of those commitments and recommendations, and there's been consistent messaging over the last 10 years. What we have agreed to implement is that we need to start somewhere. So understanding the history of the site, the fact that the Taitapā, which was a heavily occupied area, a site across that area, effectively the high rate land passage is located right alongside that. There's an obvious commitment that it needs to be fenced, protected, because it actually does get triggered. We've had 3 events in the last 2 years. Nothing certainly in the last 2 months, but when the big wastewater pond over here gets too full and we can't irrigate across all of these red lines, there's a process in place where we actually dispose of that treated wastewater out through a flow path directly out into the river, and there's some conditions around how much flow needs to be in the river. There's a whole lot of rock type gabion baskets in here, but the concept at the time of consent was that this would logically be planted up and fenced off so that we didn't have cows in there damaging the plants. So fencing's imminent. Planting will come down to ultimately the success of the initial phase of the project, but it would be likely that over time we would need more budget, but we've had to start somewhere knowing that there's financial challenges right across our community, our program, but just simply to say, well, let's wait 5 years until we can afford it, didn't really feel like it was delivering in true partnership with the commitments that are being made. So there's some general thought process, and thank you for the feedback on the presentation. I unfortunately can't take a lot of credit because I probably tweaked a couple of slides. That was Nev, who's been working away in the background, both with the presentation today, those relationships with Ngāti Whakatere, but also in commissioning the contractors and pricing. So it's very much ready to go. We've got some communications messaging that we would like to be getting out after today's briefing. That was important. We got elected members updated and we took questions. And obviously, as we move forward into next financial year, we've got a little bit more time to plan and inform you of proposed works. There's been a few curly things along the way, the risk of some noxious weeds, a number of bits and pieces, but we're learning through that process.
So this, sorry, Justin. This slide here addresses recommendation number 10. And so there was the Mayor, the CE and Daniel, and myself. They visited Taitapā with Ngāti Whakatere, and really was a recognition that Ngāti Whakatere are the hapu in place, so they're the ones that are there. It certainly doesn't dispel anyone else that might come into the area, but this was a recognition of that. So, I applaud the council for being able to do that. It was a few years before any type of interaction happened in this way. So it was a great occasion. So that was pretty cool. So these ones here again are the recommendations that were in 2018. So they slept for a little while and resurfaced again in 2022. And again, number 3, restore the repairing corridor along the Ōtauru stream. Number 6, fencing and planting around the high rate land passage. And number 10, so that's to acknowledge the cultural importance of the land and water Ngāti Whakatere Zohe.
I think it's actually probably important to note that there's a lot of good work that's already happening in place, and I think Nev mentioned earlier there's a few photos that we didn't include in the presentation that actually demonstrated a lot of the good work that's already in place and being delivered by Ngāti Whakatere alongside some of the local school kids, getting them involved with water quality treatments. So in some ways, some of these recommendations aren't actually set up there for council to need to necessarily deliver. And some of them, it's actually a matter of having an advocacy role around the likes of the fish barrier, supporting in the likes of the planting day, which is an entirely hapu-led initiative where officers wanting time and support, but it's not necessarily something that falls solely back on council. So in some ways, we're trying to work alongside and continue to deliver on some of the good work that's been done in that space. We took off some of the obvious projects, and then it might be getting back around this table and discussing how we perhaps look to the future and maybe more of the more challenging aspects around the recommendation and aspirations. So I think we've probably covered off
So this photo here, taken in 2000, I think it just gives you an idea about the stream itself and how it looks. Already within that stream is a breakdown of the ecosystem. There's a lot of weed that's in there currently. Again, that's just through the effects of the wastewater being put in there. Can you go to the next slide? And this is in 2023, this one here. I'm behind the camera. There is when we started to meet with the contractors on site and look at the what we could do in regards to the riparian planting. I did find out in the end that this particular stream here is where Horizons actually take care of that. We're over the road, so we're on the northern side. I do have some photos on there with the northern side, but it's just the same. It looks exactly the same, yeah. But again, the degradation to the stream is you can see it, yeah. So that says that we need to do something in regards to the ecosystem and the biodiversity of the stream itself.
So I think that point's been acknowledged for the last decade, that the stream certainly doesn't look like it did some time ago, and it's going to take potentially generations or decades to get it back to a point. But the message was we need to start somewhere, so we tried to, rather than taking a mindset to say let's just start at the bottom and do 20 metres a year for the next however many years, because the stream effectively connects right back up into the footholds of the Tararuas or into the back of Shannon, that we tried to look at locations where we would actually maximise community benefit and actually just usage, that areas that were occupied by the community kind of targeted the initial place to start, which is why we have proposed the initial planting and planting works both within the treatment plant itself, which is important because we're actually discharging wastewater into that area, but then also back into the community where we can actually look at some planting and some additional seating, which has some wider benefits in terms of the pathway within the existing Shannon township.
I think what this did also, if you just want to go back, it also provided the inspiration for Horizons to actually do the work on this side of the stream at the same time. So we're going to get both sides done along carrying down the road there. They've committed to that, yeah.
Gents, is the investment around this, is this OPEX or CAPEX?
Well, initially CAPEX investment, it's linked with the consent conditions of of the project itself. So the consent in itself is a capitalisable item, and so whether it's the view that certainly officers are taken, and this I suppose is more complex when we're doing things retrospectively, but certainly when we're planning for the future, that we should be considering the commitments made alongside iwi and hapu and treating that as if it the same way that we would treat the ecological advisor that turns up to provide an assessment, because they're all cost in order to get that consent. Certainly the stage within the treatment plant itself, it's within council-owned land. It's a requirement for us to be discharging wastewater. Future years, as the project progresses, we'll need some more thought process around that. In some ways, we're utilising this also, just shining a spotlight on the project, trying to get that community support, trying obviously to get Horizons to come to the party to do work that they're already committed to, that we can take some sort of advocacy role. We've been making inquiries around other funding from national type organisations. So ideally, some of this funding can be appropriately spent into capital versus some of the more operational items. We might be able to secure some external sources. So we're still, 3 months into what feels like we've said 5 years, but it's probably much longer than that. And that it's important that we start somewhere and signal a trajectory for the future.
So, apart from just the general background on the project, we also wanted to give or provide a hapu account of this as well, and what used to happen within the Ōtauru stream, and again, it's gathering kai really, and some of the species that are up there, the giant kokopu, crayfish, whitebait, watercress, brown trout, kākahi, the lot, were all found within the stream itself. So it became a basket, a food basket for Ngāti Whakatere and other hapu that were around at the same time. So in regards to the riparian planting, so Ngāti Whakatere along with the community, they also, I think it was the northern end of the Ōtauru stream, so they planted native plants across there, which ended up seeing the return of water clarity, bird life in the area, fish species that they hadn't seen for a while. So that's more towards the mountain, the Tararua Ranges, and hence the reason why they suggested that we have a go at the lower Ōtauru stream. Previously a wetland, and forests had been cleared for farming. Again, a lot of the farming, I can't blame the farm. So the farming practices at the time, again, they contributed to a lot of the degradation of the Ōtauru stream. However, again, one of the options that we do have on the table is the riparian planting, just to start that process of restoring, I guess, the ecosystem and the biodiversity of the stream. So this here is more about how the stream stands currently. So sedimentation within the stream is quite high. There's a lot of, again, oxygen weed that's in there. The temperature of the water is quite cool at the moment, so there's no fluctuation in the water itself. So again, the water's still not suitable for drinking or swimming because of the contaminants that are still around inside the stream itself. And there was some thought of some mention of an odour that comes from the stream too. Again, in the past there was no formal prohibition that said that no one can jump into the stream or gather kai. But everyone knew that it was raw sewage
that was being pumped into the stream itself. So just as a collective, I guess no one ever done it. What else? Yeah.
Probably just translate some of the next couple of slides, some of that down to the fact that we've been doing some thinking. We're very close to, we've identified the area within the wastewater plant that needs to be progressed with fencing and planting, and we're proposing almost a pilot exercise, which is called phase 2, the area, if I'm correct, Nev, which is an area very close to the corner of Margaret and
Margaret and Graham Street. Yeah, that's better.
yeah, and so there's budget set aside this financial year, around about 40k for clearance, planting. There's some seatings. There's almost a mini park type upgrade in that area, and we're proposing to pilot that alongside Hapua Place and some of the local school and wider community, alongside some of the other initiatives that are being rolled in that area and delivered by Ngāti Whakatere, primarily in relation to the Te Maire Lagoon. So there's a number of these similar type of initiatives, 3 of them over the next 3 months. We would give an assurance that this funding that's set aside in future financial years, that would come back with further scope on the project and ultimately some of the feedback on how this work's progressing and some of the good news stories, the improvements and suggested changes as we move forward. So seeking, I suppose, general level of support that there's funding for this initial work within the existing long-term plan budget this financial year. We weren't looking to bring a formal paper to council, but we certainly could in the subsequent financial year to look at the larger scale developments and procurement. Any questions?
Good guys. No questions. So probably just some comments really. One, just congratulations on the presentation. Like Councillor Boyle said, I think it's been very well put together. What I really like about it too is there's some council acknowledgement about bad practices of the past that we're willing to step up, I suppose, and make those changes and fix those practices that we know we can do better. And I think that's incredible. I think also working with locals works. And I think we're really lucky that Ngāti Whakatere have been staunch in their advocacy around their whenua and their environment. And I think actually the way that it's been presented and to have that hapu oversight about what they've seen and the changes that they've witnessed in that catchment itself is not always captured by councils and regional councils and things like that. So I think getting a first-hand signal of actually those changes and those impacts on them and their food basket and their wider environment, I think is really neat. And I also think the use of Cultural Health Index that they've provided shows that there are Māori environmental experts and groups out there that can provide a level of expertise. And I suppose it's sort of a little bit relevant to the climate change conversation we had, and I didn't raise it in there. But I think about that importance about how we marry mātauranga Māori with Western science and knowledge, because quite often I think we miss the mark. I know the area well. I've fished the area most of my life, still do. I've seen the change in the water and the quality of the water. Particularly a big change that I witnessed there was the closing of the Whaumangere, and how quickly we saw an instant change in the quality of the water at that locale. The other thing I've seen is a lot of our people in our kaumātua that can no longer go there and gather. Quite often you would see many of our elders in that particular location because it was accessible. So I think this is a great piece of work. I think we should celebrate that we are actually capturing that knowledge of our local iwi and our local hapu, and we're finding ways to work together. And I'm sure, Neville, that the group
that you represent and work with, as well as will be really happy to see that you're here, your presence is able to help push some of these initiatives through and get outcomes I think that all parties could probably celebrate. Yeah, so just thank you very much for the way it's been presented. Nami.
Hey, thanks very much for that presentation. I guess I've got a bit of oversight over this, a bit of historical knowledge around this, and I guess especially when that property where the wastewater is now delivered was obviously dairy and that catchment, so it was always a little concerning possibly with some of those practices. It's good to see this plan, and I think that'll make a massive difference to the likes of Shannon. But again, joining with Justin, I think it's great to see input from the local hub and stuff as well.
Can I say that I think it's I do recognise what HDC has done in the past. Some of the practices, of course, weren't great. But they're standing up now, which I've seen. Again, I've been in the office for the past year, and it's been humbling for me to see the change in approach, especially with iwi and with our community. Doing projects like this, I think, and I guess that goes back to the question that I asked first off. What type of legacy, would you like to leave here? So it comes back to that too, and so I think we should be proud of that this opportunity and the work that we've done in the space. The great thing about the two can also be used in other projects. This type of model, so it's transferable anywhere. But thank you.
You're a natural, Nev. Thank you. It was a really interesting walk around that whenua that time, and understanding some of the issues and seeing them, actually there was really. But those photos that you've got are pretty compelling in terms of the degradation of that space, and so if we can start making a difference in repairing that and mitigating some of the future, then it's a great start. So well done.
Can I say that every photo that was in here, apart from this one, they're all along from the Johnson Street, straight opposite the Shannon wastewater treatment plant, all the way down to Margaret Street, which is that way 57. So the pictures that cover the whole stream. So we're able to put them in there with a bit of magic.
Acknowledge the comments on the presentation today, and so obviously know who I'll be looking for support preparing my next presentation. Thanks very much, everyone.
We're a little bit ahead of time now, which
Which
is
is great.
So could we just maybe have a couple of 5-minute break while we get the team and get the next presentation up, which is on our long-term plan.